The paper I'm going to present today is the influence of auditor and time section 4.4 process on remediation of internal control deficiencies audit severity. So this paper, I think the most important thing about this paper is that they use the data extracted proprietary from auditor firms. That's they address that, just like I said, they use the firm's client's own remediation compared to what publicly known remediation to see how actually they respond to the SOX change and how the internal control process actually happened within the firm. And they further examine how the firm characteristics, auditor characteristics, and the ICD characteristics affect remediation of ICDs. So here's a little background. SOX Section 4.4 was designed to improve corporate controls by requiring company management and external auditors to document and test internal controls over financial reporting. And the prior research used public available data can only address remediation of material weakness that have been previously disclosed to the public, and it is difficult to discern whether a specific material weakness was actually remediated and how it is remediated. And here's a small picture of how this paper adds to the existing research. So here is the reporting date, and during this time, the auditors and the firm.
Can I give you a good marker so we can see what we're doing there?
Okay.
Oh, that's better, correct?
Yeah. So here, the firm start their internal control testing process, and at the same time, the auditor, they will choose the time to start their testing, and independently. And if at the reporting date, whatever the weakness is not remediated, they will disclose to the public. And next year, if it's still not remediated, they will again report this weakness. This is what the previous research.
So that's what I thought it was,
yeah.
From year to year comparison of if you got a qualified state, you got a statement on controls, or if it was cleaned up, if it was weakness on controls and then was not, there was remediation. And this paper examines internal information about how remediation was done, correct?
Yeah, and they make the comparison and how likely the firms are gonna remediate it and what factors.
And the authors of this paper, Jean Bedard, she is a Bentley, and she publishes like a machine, okay? Like after Kinney and Mark publishes even more papers than Mark at this stage. And the other guy is called Lynn Graham, and he was a faculty here. And then he went to work for BDO as the guy in charge of auditing at BDO, and then he was in Standards, and now he is at Bentley. He really is not a Bentley, he just visits there now. He's a good friend of Jean Bedard. But he knows a lot about practice, and I bet you that he got the data for Jean.
So the first research question they addressed is like they compare this part with this part, the remediation within a firm before disclosure and the remediation after disclosure. So they expect that the proportion of detected ICDs remediated within the discovery year will be lower than that observed for public reported in material weaknesses, because they said that company personnel, they will likely detect fewer ICDs and understate their severity, and the time available for remediation between discovery of some ICDs and the balance sheet dates can be too short for them to make many remediations, and so they can only choose the maybe most severe problems. And thirdly, until after the balance sheet date, results of the search for control flows are not visible to the public. So because they are costly, they take time, so firms will avoid the costly remediation which the markets are not aware. And the second research issue they look at is which factors, which characteristics will influence the remediation likelihood. And they first look at company characteristics. Specifically, basically, they examine IT personnel, internal audit personnel, decision to hire a consultant for Section 404 activity, and time available to remediation, and the reporting structure. And here is their expectations and how they just save time. So the second is auditor characteristics. So they expect that auditor characteristics will also affect how likely the firms will remediate this internal control deficiencies. Auditor discovered ICDs will be less likely to be remediated because first of all, those questions, because initially the internal control personnel, they ignore those problems. Maybe they do not understand the issues. So once they are pointed to, the auditors pointed these problems to them, they might not understand in the beginning. So that takes time for them to remediate it. And there's less time available for them to make corrections. So the second is detection methods. They predict that ICDs detected using substantive tests will be less likely to be remediated because usually this will happen in the fourth quarter, and that means they will have less time. And also, if they find the problems until the last stage, they would wonder why we didn't make this mistake and what happened during the previous steps. So they will try to figure out why, and this also takes time and reduce the likelihood of remediation. And the last one is existing misstatement associated with the ICD. If that happens, auditors could be more focused on the control flow and apply more stringent standards, and the discussion of the implication of the misstatement could delay remediation. And lastly, they also look at the types of ICDs, whether it's entity level ICDs, revenue ICDs, and these are predicted to be slower to be remediated. And they will talk about it in the model. So they gather the data from several large audit firms, and the time covers 2004 to 2005, just maybe after the SOX. And they engagements in the non-regulated industries, of course. And they asked the audit firms to provide data that are randomly chosen as to a degree as possible. And they asked that revenues of sample clients to be less than $1 billion. And the final sample consists of 3,990 ICDs identifying in 76 engagements on 44 companies. So here's the models. The first model.
Just 1 second. Can you imagine the effort that was to get this data? The firms keep some of this data, but they keep it, I guarantee you that they keep it in different ways, okay? And so this is a huge effort. When you say, oh, this is empirical, can you imagine how much effort they did for getting this thing? And I'm actually surprised. I had forgotten the firms, and my assumption was that all the data came from BDO because Lynn worked on BDO, but no, they got it from many firms. And it has to be that these firms keep this information in different ways, and probably not in a database. Maybe they have to collect this out of the working papers manually. How did they do it? Did they say that?
The companies send the data to them. They do not see the data directly, they just see the results. The firms do the data processing. They cannot know which clients they are using, so that's one of the key.
This is the difficulty we have too. For example, analytical review. The best way to do this is comparing sectors by industry. And so you would have 10 clients in banks, you would create a model out of the 10 banks and then compare against yours per industry that you work on. But they are forbidden to do that. They can't use data from one client to evaluate the other client. It's called the Rule 301, and this AICPA rule, not the PCOB rule. It's an old rule. It's a terrible rule because auditing would be improved tremendously. And actually, we are talking about putting a big argument against it. But in this case, they had to kind of probably specify the variables, and someone in the audit firm pull these variables out per value. Okay, and they might there be violating some of the privacy rules.
Yeah, they cannot know which firm. And I think that's probably the biggest contribution to sweepers to gather the data. So these are the two models. I think we just addressed how they predict the variables to be, because there are many variables I cannot explain them explicitly. So many variables. So here's the descriptive. We can see that the client companies with relatively high remediation have they start earlier, and they have both for the auditors and themselves, they start earlier. And the same is true. And another thing is that integration, the high remediation firms, they have a higher score of the IT integration, and they are slightly larger, less likely to have a net loss, and less likely to have been public for 5 or fewer years. It's just a comparison. And here is their regression results. We can see that, as expected, do I have time to go through this, or
Just fast.
Yeah, we can see the significant results for multi-client and in IT integration, internal audit quality, and not for this one. So basically, everything's just as expected, except for the consultant, because they explain that this is possibly because at that time the major role of the consultant is not in the remediation part. They just like testing, valuing, not remediation. So that's their reasoning. And so additionally, they have run some sensitivity tests. They explore whether the effect of Section 404 process differ in client and auditor detected subsamples. They add a series of interaction with auditor discovered and the other Section 404 process variables defined above. And the results suggest that the main effect of misstatement is not significant, but the interaction of misstatement with auditor detection is negative and significant. This shows an association misstatement only reduces remediation like it would a non-auditor discovered detection, detected ICDs. And the interaction of IT integrated and auditor discovered is negative and significant, while the main effect of IT integration is positive. It indicates that better integration helps clients remediate the ICDs that are detected by client personnel but not those detected by auditors. This is also true because they may not understand it in the beginning. So the second test they run is they use a 2-year sample of data, which tremendously reduced the sample size, but they have still drawn some conclusion that the remediation rate, the experience did not improve companies' ability to completely remediate these relatively difficult control problems. And here are the conclusion limitations. I think we have.
Good job, fast.
Yeah.
Who's commenting on this? Just make some comment from there because we're finishing time.
Actually, this paper says, like, as she mentioned, like very well, the paper is about internal control of over financial reporting, which says that it tells how the top level is efficient to control the errors or the material weaknesses in the company's finance, and what all designs and methods can be used and implemented to control this. So basically, when so this all this result was experiment was carried out, and the models were designed. So in this model, like I previously mentioned, they had flags which specifically says what is wrong and what is right. Like if the remedy is covered throughout in the process, the flag will change to 1. If not, the flag will change, it will remain to 0, and it will be carried on to the next year till the auditors like rectify it. But the thing is, during this process, when the time comes to rectify it, the time for auditors is less because they start late, and the process of like this error just piles up till the time, but they don't have time in the end to remediate it, and that is the reason it gets passed to the next year. And in the end, there's limitation, and there are consequences for the internal control deficiency. But if this section is not included in the process, without IT help, it's very difficult to observe what's going wrong and what's going right in the company.
So, when you cannot find main effect differences, you go to examining the interactions. And that's what happened here. The great merit of this paper is collecting data that's not available. And remember, there's always, you think that you have flexible time, but in reality, if you do a lot of the data, you don't have time to do a lot of analysis. If you get data like she said, empirical is in our hand, then you have more data and you can be more sophisticated. And so Janine Clough, which I mentioned, spent so much time collecting data that her analysis was just pretty primitive. And it's always like that. I like this paper. I think it's a good paper, and it kind of motivates you to try to dig into data. But it demotivates you thinking about how much effort that is. And did you learn something from this paper? What did you learn? Go ahead, get louder.
Getting data is important.
Getting data is difficult and important. Yes. Okay, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
If there are financial weaknesses in the company, then the evaluation of company might change over the period of time.
Yeah, but the effects that they found are pretty intuitive, aren't they? Meaning the interaction effects and etc. Okay, guys. I'll see. Don't forget, we have a Friday class this week, and my apologies to you for changing the day. If for some reason you have a major conflict, send me an email, because I understand that it was my fault for changing the day, and I'm going to have to do this once more time.